All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining. It is 1 o'clock Mountain Time, so we will go ahead and get started. I do hope that there is not a lag. If there is, this will be recorded and it will be uploaded to our YouTube channel probably next week. But today's session is on 5 of my favorite features in Business Central. And hopefully you get some tips and tricks along the way. But let's go ahead and let's get started. So I'm Kristen Hosman. I'm the founder of Mount Evans Consulting. We focus primarily on Business Central implementations and support. So today I'm representing Mount Evans Consulting, and I'm also a Microsoft MVP, focusing on Business Central as well, located just outside of Denver, Colorado. And I do have a discount code on here. If you've heard about Dynamics Con Live, it is coming to Denver, May of 2024. There's a 10% discount here if you'd like to go. And then if you scan that barcode or go to my link tree, that's where all my links to my personal blog, my LinkedIn, all of that information is right there. So check that out if you are interested. But enough about me. Let's get started and look at some of my favorite tips. So the first one that I want to talk about is GL account review. And this is new to Business Central. It is a feature that allows you to really reconcile your balance sheet accounts, or really any account, right within Business Central, and not having to kick that data out to Excel to get that task completed. So what does that look like in Business Central? Well, we're going to go ahead and we're going to jump into Business Central, and I'm going to give you a couple scenarios here on how I utilize this tool. So first off, there's a little bit of setup that needs to happen in the chart of accounts. And in my scenario, I'm using American Express Payable for this example. So there is times where vendor will send me an invoice and I want to pay that on my credit card and have that sit in a liability account until I get my credit card statement. Then I go ahead and true everything up and get it into accounts payable. But how do I do that exactly? So in the chart of accounts, there is a new field that you're going to see in here, and it's called Review Policy. So for this example, I have it turned on to allow review and match balance. Now, out of the box, it's just going to be none. So this is going to be disabled out of the box. So you do have to manually go and do that. So I'm going to go ahead and just turn that on, allow review and match balance. And what that's going to allow me to do is when I drill into the general ledger entries and filter it based on that account number, let me turn Analyze off here for a moment. But when I drill in, I now have a button up here called Review Entries on the menu bar. And if I click that, it's going to open up another window, which is going to allow me to review everything that's hit that general ledger account. So debits, credits, different things like that. You can see here that there's a negative 10,080. So that means that I paid a vendor with my American Express card. That expense should show up on my next statement of the next American Express statement. I also have a couple other charges on here, but let's go ahead and talk about what else I have set up to make this work pretty smoothly. All right, so let me just close out of here. We'll go back to our homepage. And the first thing I set up is within the chart of accounts, the review entries and apply, right? The second thing that I set up to make this work smoothly is a payment method. So when I go into payment methods here, I have an American Express payment method with a balance account of a GL account. And then this is my American Express account. So what this allows me to do is it allows me to create a vendor invoice, make sure that I have that payment method selected. And as soon as I click post, the system is going to automatically show that invoice paid via American Express. Now, of course, sometimes you want to enter in an invoice and maybe you don't pay it for a week or two. That's okay. Just leave the payment method code off, and then you can add that later on in like a payment journal to get it to close out to this as well. All right, so that's setup wise. Now let's see how it works. So I'm going to go ahead and just close out this get started, and I'm going to go into purchase invoice. And from here, I'm going to select my vendor that I'm paying. So I got an invoice from Mount Evans Consulting. That is going to be getting paid via a credit card. So make sure that all this information up on the header is entered in just like you normally would. No difference there. Let's go ahead and put our line detail in. And the system is a little bit slow for me just because I'm streaming. So hopefully it's not lagging on your end. But here you can see that I have an invoice for $16 coming from MEC. If I scroll down here to this payment method code, I do have it set up as American Express on the vendor card. So what that means is every time I enter an invoice in for MEC, it's automatically going to show up as the payment method code American Express. So in this scenario, I've paid this invoice right away. It was due upon receipt. They're going to charge my credit card right away. So I want that in there. From here, I'm going to go ahead and post this invoice. Now, out of the box, when you post, you're going to get this message saying the invoice is posted. Do you want to review or open the posted invoice? It's kind of annoying notification. So for today's purposes, I'm just going to go ahead and turn that notification off. So here's a little extra tip for you. Notifications are going to be user specific. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to type in post because it has something to do with posting. And then it's this confirm after posting documents. So we'll go ahead and turn that off so that message goes away moving forward. All right. So what just happened in the system? I'm going to go back to the chart of accounts just because it's easier to get there. And we're going to look up this American Express account. And I'm going to see that transaction that I just did hit this account. Okay, so the $16 right here, that just hit the account. So I entered the vendor invoice. When I posted it, the system automatically put it as paid and then hit the American Express payable account. Now let's fast forward a little bit and let's say that we get that American Express credit card statement. Okay. So I'm in accounts payable. I get this statement. The first thing I do with this statement is maybe print it off, export it to Excel, whatever is easiest for you. But what I'm doing with that statement is I'm going to go through and I'm going to look in the general ledger and I'm going to say, okay, yep, that $16 hit the credit card. Yep, that $10,080 that hit the credit card. Yep, 59, 59, 99. All of those hit the credit card. So I'm notating that on the statement some way, somehow. Maybe I'm highlighting it. Maybe I'm making notes, something like that. I actually happen to have a credit card statement here, and you can see I just simply highlight and I put notes on here letting me know that, yep, I've already entered that invoice. Now, there's going to be several transactions on that American Express statement that may not be entered into the system yet, and that's okay. So let's fast forward and let's go and enter in that statement from American Express to see what the next steps are. We're going to go ahead and do another purchase invoice. Okay, and from here, the important thing is now I'm entering the invoice in for American Express. And for me, I always make my vendor invoice number to match my statement end date. So we'll just pretend that that is today. And then what I do down here is any transactions that hit the credit card, instead of going straight to an expense account because we already hit the expense account, I go ahead and I just have it hit American Express. So I come in here and I'm just, kind of copying everything off of that statement at this point. You could export that statement to Excel. You could make it in a certain format so that you can actually copy paste in here as well, just to make it a little bit easier for you. So we're going to go ahead and we're just going to enter in some information here. So we have 4 transactions that have already hit the American Express GL. So I'm just going to go ahead and enter those in right now. All right, almost done here. Okay, let's say on this one, they charged the credit card $59.98. Now we entered that invoice in as $59.99. Okay, so that's going to be a discrepancy that we're going to see in a moment. And then let's say that there's another transaction on the American Express that never got entered. So this is going to be one of those scenarios where something hit the credit card, but we never got it entered into the system in a timely manner. Okay, so this dollar amount down here, this $10,279.98, that's going to be the amount on your statement, right? So like your monthly charges are going to add up to that. If you by chance have a credit memo on your statement, maybe you get like rewards or something like that. I know I do. So I can come in here and I can say American Express rewards. And just put that as a negative dollar amount here. So again, this total down here, this $10,269.98, that should match your statement balance. Okay, so just keep that in mind when you're entering in this purchase invoice. Now for the payment method on this one, I have it blank because, we're going to enter this statement in when we get it. And then in a couple of weeks when it's due, we're going to pay it. And then we're going to go through a payment journal. So nothing really out of the ordinary here as far as that process goes. I'm going to go ahead and post this. And then what we're going to do is we're going to get an error message because that's the way it goes on a live demo. So tax group code must have a value. Let's go ahead and just make these all non-taxable for this webinar. Let me get those in there. All right, now we'll go ahead and post and cross our fingers. There's nothing else set up in this demo company that's going to trip me up along the way. Perfect. So that went ahead and that got entered. So we're going to see that now sitting in this outstanding vendor invoices section. If I click on those 14, we're going to see American Express in here as being entered to be paid. Okay. But what does that do to our American Express payable liability account, right? Let's go ahead and look at that. So I'm going to go back to the chart of accounts at this point, and I'm going to look up account number 22250 because that is my American Express payable account. I can see it's off by a penny. Remember, we talked about this. I entered in a transaction that was off a cent just a couple minutes ago, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say review entries, because as an accountant at the end of the month, especially liabilities and even some assets, you want to reconcile out your debits and credits, and then your ending balance should match, whatever is left in that account. So that's really what we're doing here with this process. I can come in here and I can click on the tell as I'm clicking here. And from here, I'm going to say set selected as reviewed. And now you can see this was reviewed by Kristen on 12/7 at 1:16 p.m. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do that process for anything that I can match up debit credit wise. Now I am going to get stuck on one of these because remember it was off a penny. Okay. So if I try to match something up in here that doesn't net out to zero, it's going to yell at me. Okay. So now I know as an accountant that I'm going to have to do an adjusting entry to the American Express payable account. So from here, I can just go to a journal entry, hit this account, come back in here and match those 3 transactions. So it's kind of similar to doing a bank reconciliation where you're reconciling your bank statement against the bank ledger. You can select multiple things to apply against each other or to review against each other. And then as long as they net zero, it'll be okay. But what does this mean? At the end of the month, I can come in here and I can say, hey, hide reviewed entries. And then I can see here's my debits and credits that are hanging out in here. This is what makes up that 1 cent that we're off. Okay. So no more kicking things out to Excel or maintaining reconciliations outside of the system. You can now see how easy it is to do it right within Business Central. All right, so let's go to the next tip. The next tip is adding a field to a page. So with this one, we're talking about version 23 of Business Central. So if you're not on version 23 of Business Central, you can still add fields to a page. However, with version 23, Microsoft is allowing you to add any field within the table to the page. So you're limited before 23. When you're on 23, you have more options. So let's go talk about this. Let's go into purchase invoice. And let's go ahead and add a couple fields. Okay. So what I'm going to do here is, in order to enable this, I'm just going to click on a vendor real fast. Excuse me. I really hope this isn't lagging like it is for me. For you guys, that would not be fun. But let's go ahead and enable that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up to my settings and I'm going to click personalize. Now, if you can't see personalize on your end, that's just because of a security thing on your end. So you don't have the right security to get there. So maybe some administrator or someone needs to do it for you and make the change at a profile role level. So what do I mean by that? When you personalize, you're only affecting you, the user logged in at the time. But there is a way to personalize or customize Business Central at a role level so that it affects more people than just the person doing it. So what I'm about ready to show you can be done. Some of it can be done at a user level, but some of it needs to be done at a profile role level. It'll tell you if it needs to be done at a profile role level when you try and do it. So it won't be a surprise. But let's go ahead in the line section and let's come over to the right-hand side here, add field to page. So again, version 23 is going to look like this, where it has the recommended fields. My system's really loading really slow, but once this is done loading, we'll be able to click on there and have a couple more options. If you're on version 22 or earlier, then you're not going to see the recommended fields. But you can see here that Microsoft is allowing us to see all the fields bound to the table, which is new. That's a version 23 update, okay? For this example, though, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to add the deferral code to the line section of my purchase invoice. So you can see how easy it was for me to add a field. I can also move things around if I don't like the order they're in. I can also hide things when I'm in personalization as well. So when you're new to Business Central and you're having to scroll a lot because there's a lot of fields and you're not using a lot of them, it can be really annoying. So just remember that there is the personalization. If you do have a team, I would highly recommend, instead of personalizing, I would do a profile role customization. That way it can affect more people than just one. But the add field to page, that is one of my favorite new features. Okay. The next one is the deferral schedule. So the field that I just added to this purchase invoice is something that does not show out of the box. So this next tip is on deferrals or prepaids type scenario. But you need that field added. So that's why I added it for this example. But let's go a little bit backwards and let's go look at setup when it comes to deferrals. So I'm going to go to deferral templates. Now, if you don't know what deferrals mean and you're on the call, think prepaids, think deferred revenue. Okay. So for example, we're going to use prepaids here. And you can see that I have two set up. I have one set up for prepaid rent and I have one set up for prepaid other. So if you're an accountant, you're used to dealing with prepaids. And most likely you're probably doing a monthly journal entry to amortize them out or expense them in the period that they need to be expensed in. Microsoft has thought about that whole process, and they've actually made it really easy for you because they've built a solution in the system that will do the journal entries for you on a monthly basis automatically. Okay. So let's take a look at prepaid other and see how this is set up. So I've given it a deferral code of prepaid other. The deferral account is going to be the prepaid account, so the asset account where that money is going to sit. And then the deferral percentage, how do you want it to be deferred? You have a couple options there. How do you want it to be started? Is it on the posting date, beginning of next period, and so forth? I used to work for a company where if the invoice or the subscription started after the 15th of the month, we would start expensing it the beginning of the next period. But if it was before the 15th of the month, we would do it, in that month. So think about how you're doing your expenses. How many number of periods do you want to expense it out for? I'm just saying 12 because I like to pay things, a year in advance. And then you do have the option to give a period description. So I just say prepaid other expenses. Now, everything on here other than the deferral account can be customized at the time you're entering the invoice. So let's go ahead and jump into entering an invoice. All right, so we have an invoice started for Mount Evans Consulting here. Let me go ahead and just expand the general tab so that I can put an invoice number in here. And then I'll go ahead and minimize it just so I get a little bit more real estate. So in this scenario, we're going to say that MEC is billing us for licenses. Okay. Now, what type of licenses? These are your BC team member licenses. Okay. And maybe you have one license and it is for 12 months and it's $8 a month. Okay, so I'm doing a little bit of math. You can see the system allows you to do math in those fields as long as you don't do an equal sign. So there's another little quick tip for you. Okay, But what's happening here is if I post this right now, $96 is going to hit my expense account. But really, what I want it to do is I want it to go sit in prepaids and then amortize out $8 a month for 12 months. Okay. So, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go to deferral code and I'm going to tell it, hey, this needs to be prepaid other. And then there's a little ellipsis right here, 3 dots. So I'm going to click on that. And this is actually going to show me the schedule. So I can see here that it's going to be a straight line. The number of periods are 12. It's going to start on 12/7 because we have it starting on posting date. Okay. Now, I can come in here and I can change the description if I want, and I can call this BC, team member license. And then instead of having to type that over and over again, I can just hit F8 on my keyboard, and F8 is going to copy whatever the field above it is. All right. So there's another little tip for you. Okay. Now, I can also come in here and I can say, nope, you know what? We really want this to be 10 periods. Okay, so I can update that and then I can say calculate schedule and it will recalculate it based on whatever I'm putting in this top section. Okay, so tons of different things that you can do. The nice thing about this, like I said, is that as soon as I post this, the system's going to move the $96 into the prepaid account, the asset account, but then it's also going to automatically create the debits and credits that are needed every single month on these posting dates. All right. So let's go ahead and close that. And let's go ahead and do a preview posting to see what it looks like. And you can see 28 journal entries are being done. All right. So originally here, let me just go ahead and sort this by posting date. But here you can see the $96 going between prepaids and the AP account. But then you can see it coming out of prepaids and it going into the expense account down here, right? So tons of entries, but basically what it's doing is it's going to hit the expense, immediately go to prepaids, and then every single month thereafter, the system's going to do what it needs to do to amortize it out. So let's go ahead and post this. And I want to show you why this feature is so amazing. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and click OK to post this. And I'm just going to go into the chart of accounts and we're going to look for prepaid expenses. The account number here that I'm looking for is 166600. And you can see the balance is 0. Well, how is the balance 0? Because we just push something in there. But really it's 0 because it makes all these entries into the future. Okay, so these entries are going into 2024. Okay, there is a allow posting from, allow posting to in the general ledger setup for deferrals. So make sure that you have that turned on as well, because maybe you don't want people posting things into the future, into like 2025, 2026 yet. So you can actually restrict when people can post to deferrals as well. The last thing on deferrals that I want to talk about is the reports. So at the end of the year, 2023, there's still going to be money on the balance sheet sitting in prepaid other. And there's actually a really nice report that you can go and pull. So because we entered that in as a vendor invoice, we're going to go to the purchasing deferral summary, but you can see you can do deferrals for sales, so customers, and you can also do deferrals through the general ledger. So the general ledger is the option that we take when we're implementing Business Central. If a client has things in prepaids today, we'll just enter it through a GL entry and then add a deferral so that moving forward, they can use this functionality. But in today's scenario, again, purchasing, I'm going to go ahead and just change this balance to 1231, and we're going to do a preview on this. So we're going to be able to see really quickly what is in the prepaid other as of the end of the year. So all of these reports together would equal what is sitting in that account, should be, right? So at the end of the year, we have remaining amount deferred of 9490.84. Okay. So again, that's your report then that you can give to your CPA or your auditors to tie back to your prepaid account. All right, let me go to our next tip. The next tip here is show debit and credits amounts. Okay. So there's several times during an implementation or just, support where clients will email me and they'll say, okay, how can I show debits and credits throughout the system? Because that's, as an accountant, that's what you're used to seeing, instead of just this amount field here. Okay. So they want to see debit and credit. There's actually a setting that's, I don't know how new it is, so I can't say it's fairly new, but I believe it's fairly new. It's within the general ledger setup window. Okay. So if I go to the general ledger setup window, there's a field over here off to the right that says show amounts. I can change that to say, hey, only show debit and credit or show all amounts. I'm going to go ahead and show all amounts for this example. Go back to my general ledger entries, and it's fairly quick to update. Okay, so you can see it just updated, but now we have the amount column, we have a debit column and a credit column. This is actually going to show throughout the system. So if you're doing general ledger entries or, vendor stuff, it's going to show throughout the system that way. So that is the show debit and credit amounts. The last thing I want to talk about is a brand new feature that is coming out, I believe 2024, probably the Wave 2 version, but it's analysis views. And this functionality is getting a lot of hype, okay? If you're not on version 23 yet, or maybe you are on version 23, but it's not enabled, you do need to go into feature management. So just do a global search for feature management and look for the feature preview analysis mode. And you can see here, it's coming Q4 of 2023. So it's actually coming out in version 23 now. So scratch the 24 that I said, it's going to be 23. Okay. But if it's not enabled, you can go ahead and enable that for all users. All right. So I do have it enabled in my scenario here. So let's go ahead and see what all the fuss is about. I'm an accountant and I live in this general ledger entries window every single month end, right? And I'm searching across the board for different things and I'm kicking it out to Excel and I'm running pivot tables and I'm getting balances and all of that fun, right? And I'm going to stop you right there. You don't need to kick it out to Excel any longer. All right. So Microsoft has brought the power of pivot tables to Business Central. How cool is that? All right. I wish I could hear y'all cheering in the background right now, but I can't. So because I have this enabled, you're going to see this analyze toggle on a lot of the different list views in Business Central. So just because I'm in the general ledger entries, it is in like the vendor ledger entries, bank ledger entries, customers, different things like that, right? You're going to see it. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that on and immediately my screen is going to refresh. Okay. Now I do have one report mocked up. This report that I've mocked up is showing me net changes per month by each GL account. All right. And then I can click on the caret to expand it. And I can click on that caret to go Q2 and I can start drilling in, right? So this tool is really popular because, again, it's bringing, pivot tables to Business Central, but it's also allowing users to create custom type reports without having to go to a developer. I had a client recently reach out and he said, "Hey, can you build this report, this custom report that I need built?" And I said, "Can you hold on? Because as soon as you get updated to version 23, you're going to have everything that you want." And I went into my sandbox and I sent him a screenshot and he was just jumping for joy, right? I'm not telling you to go update to version 23. Talk with your partner about that. But if you're on version 22 yet, you can go into feature management and you can enable this today and have this functionality. So again, it works a lot like pivot tables do in BC or in Excel. You have rows, you have values, you have columns. When you first open up Analyze, pivot mode is going to be turned off. So it'll look something more like this out of the box, but then you can just click and toggle on pivot mode. There's also filters that you can filter by as well. The screenshot here is going to be on columns. So totals at the bottom. You can also save these views. So you can rename them, you can duplicate them, you can save them, you can move them around. So you can have as many of these as you need really in your system. So think about those reports that you're kicking out at the end of the month and massaging and manually making. One thing to note, if you leave Analyze on and you close the window, next time you go into that window, Analyze is going to be turned on. This was already a sticky point for someone that I knew. They go, "Why am I opening general ledger entries and it looks like this? What happened to the old view?" And I'm like, "Oh, well, at one point you clicked Analyze and you closed it." So just remember that if you want to go back to your old view, you just need to turn Analyze off, and then you're going to see this old view that you have come to know and love. All right. So that concludes my top 5 tips. I hope you learned something. If you have a favorite tip that we did not cover, make sure to put it in the comments or, on the event page, you can leave a message. But we do these little webinars about once every quarter. So just keep your eyes peeled for the next one coming in Q1 of 2024. And I hope everyone here has a happy holiday and a good New Year's. Thank you again for joining.